Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Classic Comics live stream. Thank you for joining me. I want to thank everyone who's going to watch both during the stream and on a rewatch as well. All right. So for this stream, mainly going to be very Disney focused. Disney's losing a lot of money in a lot of different ways. In some ways, you might not even be aware of. That lawsuit down in Florida, that's not the only lawsuit Disney's involved in. They got other lawsuits coming at them, and some of them aren't having good ends. But of course, the big thing is all the losses they're taking at the box office and in various other ways. Beyond that, I'll talk a little, think about James Gunn and some of the decisions he's making regarding the DCU that he's building. And we'll look at Blue Beetle's box office. My review for Blue Beetle is on my channel. Please do give that a look. And if we have time, I don't know, maybe we'll check out a couple other things. But let's just go ahead and get started kicking Disney around because it's fun. All right. So this story is from sfgate.com. Let me bring this up. All right. So Disney to take $2.5 million hit per room at failed Galactic Star Cruiser hotel. So when you look at the losses, it's costing them about 2.5 million per room. Scrapping the infamous Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser hotel cost Disney 250 million. The company announced in its quarterly earnings call last week. With only 100 guest rooms, that breaks down to 2.5 million per room for the failed venture. The Galactic Star Cruiser in Disney World was billed as a one-of-a-kind Star Wars experience. Each two-night booking was meant to feel like boarding a cruise ship in outer space, and guests were given a mission involving characters from the most recent Star Wars trilogy. It was a gamble on a relatively niche and expensive concept. But at about $4,800 for a two-person cabin, the cheapest tier offered, Disney fans complained that it was simply too much for 2 days. In May, barely 1 year since opening, Disney announced it was shuttering the Galactic Star Cruiser. The company is now in the midst of writing off the expensive flop. At Wednesday's earnings call, Disney attributed a dip in the theme park division to, quote, a decrease at Walt Disney World primarily due to higher costs, inflation, and accelerated depreciation related to the planned closure of Galactic Star Cruiser, and lower volumes. Interim Chief Financial Officer Kevin Lansbury said the company is looking at an accelerated depreciation of 250 million for the Star Cruiser, which is in line with the earlier numbers given by Disney's Parks Chair Josh D'Amaro in May. D'Amaro estimated 100 million to 150 million in depreciation in both of the final 2 quarters of 2023. Revenue is still up in the Disney Parks, Experiences, and Products division, however. For the third quarter, which ended July 1st, the division posted 8.3 billion in revenue. It's not clear what will happen to the warehouse-like building where the Star Cruiser was housed. In May, Disney spokesperson told SFGate that there were no immediate plans for repurposing the space or integrating any of it into the Star Wars theme land in Hollywood studios. The planning webpage for the Star Cruiser shows no availability for the remainder of its existence. The last day for the hotel is September 30th. Wow. So yeah, that cost them quite a bundle. And yeah, I mean, just 4,800 is just a crazy price tag. I mean, but this kind of goes in line with what they've been doing. They've basically been increasing costs in a number of ways for customers and just kind of banking that devout Disney fans will continue to pay the higher prices and keep coming. And I don't know how much that plays into the supposed stories about, reduced crowds at Disneyland. There are people posting photos online showing Disneyland being empty and what have you. I don't know how much those correlate. I assume there is some. But I think, as they mentioned in the story, it's still profitable. I think part of that is, I think most of the losses are really coming overseas. Or I'm sorry, no, the losses are here, but overseas, the parks are still doing well. That's what I meant to say. So I think, all the business overseas is helping keep that division afloat. All right. Let me move on to the next one here. And this comes from Forbes. All right. So Willow, the abandoned streaming series, could cost Disney 100 million. Disney has revealed that it spent 105.9 million on making Willow, a sword and sorcery series which was dropped from its streaming platform after just 6 months. The sequel to the beloved 1988 movie with the same name stars Warwick Davis, who reprises his role as the eponymous hero alongside Aaron Kellyman, Ellie Bamber, and the Grand Budapest Hotel's Tony Revolori. Based on characters created by George Lucas, the series was developed by Jonathan Kasdan, son of longtime Lucasfilm collaborator Lawrence Kasdan, who co-wrote The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Disney acquired the rights to Willow when it bought Lucasfilm from its founder George Lucas for $4 billion in 2012. 7 years later, Ron Howard, director of the original movie, revealed that he had been approached by Jonathan Kasdan about working on a sequel series for the Disney Plus streaming platform. And in October 2020, it got the green light. The 8-part series debuted just over 2 years later and ran until January 2023. Wasn't that long ago? It seems longer ago, doesn't it? At the time it was commissioned, the pandemic had thrown much of the world into lockdown, leaving consumers craving new streaming content. Disney was eagerly adding shows to its platform in a bid to attract more subscribers than its rivals, and no expense was spared. Budgets of streaming shows are usually confidential as studios combine the cost of them in their overall expenses and don't itemize how much they spend on each one. Shows made in the United Kingdom are exceptions, and Willow is one of them. It benefited from the UK's television tax relief scheme, which allows studios to claim a cash reimbursement of up to 25% of the money they spend there. To qualify, shows must pass a points test based on factors such as how much filming was done in the UK, the level of UK content, whatever that means, and how much they promote UK heritage. Furthermore, at least 10% of the core costs of the production need to relate to activities in the UK. In order to demonstrate this to the UK government, studios set up a separate television production company for each picture. These television production companies, or TPCs, have to file publicly available financial statements showing everything from the headcount and salaries to the total cost of the production and the amount of cash they have been reimbursed. UK government's regulations state that each TPC must be, quote, responsible for pre production, principal photography, and post production of the television program and for delivery of the completed program, unquote. Accordingly, there is no doubt that their financial statements show all the costs of each series. It isn't even possible for studios to hide costs in other companies, as the law also states that there can be only one TPC in relation to a program. There can be only one. Companies usually have code names so that they don't raise attention when filing for permits to film on location. The Disney subsidiary behind Willow is called Barking Lion Productions, in a nod to the mythical creatures that populate the show. It recently filed financial statements for the first 17 months to December 31st of 2021, which covers pre-production and filming of the series. That incurred costs of 105.9 million, and the tally is set to soar in the next set of financial statements. They should show the bulk of the expenses for the post production work, which was led by the London office of Lucasfilm's Industrial Light and Magic. The net spending on the show was reduced by a 20.4 million cash reimbursement for filming in the UK, but it doesn't stop there. Lucasfilm chose to film Willow in Wales, a country within the UK which offers additional fiscal incentives to studios. The local government there gave Lucasfilm a 5.1 million grant, bringing the net spending on Willow to 80.4 million. Production was based at Dragon Studios in South Wales and filmed at 32 locations around the country. They included Morley Quarry, where the opening scenes were set, and Merthyr Mawr, hope I'm saying that right, which was the backdrop for Willow's home. Lucasfilm built 5 sets at Dragon Studios, totaling 28,000 square feet, as well as 20 additional buildings for the purposes of creature creation, puppeteering work, special effects, and costumes. It made its mark on the local film industry. Lucasfilm hired 25 trainees for 6 months, as well as 206 Welsh citizens who were members of the crew. As a result, 17 of the 29 production departments were led by Welsh citizens, while not Welsh crew were also paired with Welsh citizens. In December, Creative Wales, the government agency that promotes the development of Lucasfilm, reported that brands such as Lucasfilm, Netflix, and Bad Wolf have pumped more than 197.5 million of production into the Welsh economy. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a bit because I mean they kind of focus on other productions that have come and produced in Wales, like that Wrexham show that Ryan Reynolds has. You see that there. Let me see. Okay. Although the series has an 84% critic score on review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, the audience only gave 65%. Willow's audience was reportedly amongst the lowest for a Disney Plus show, with industry analyst Samba TV reporting that only 481,000 households watched the show in its first 5 days of release, despite 2 episodes being available. At the other end of the spectrum, the debut episode of hit Marvel streaming show Loki attracted 2.5 million households over the same time frame, according to Samba TV. Accordingly, it was no surprise when Deadline reported in March that Willow would not be renewed for a second season. Just days later, Jonathan Kasdan described Willow's status as more of a pause than cancellation. Yeah, sure. He noted that the second season has been written and will hopefully eventually be made, but not for at least the next 12 months, leading to the decision to release the cast. Since then, darker clouds have gathered over the future of the show as it was removed from Disney Plus at the end of May amidst a content removal purge as part of a broader cost cutting initiative. Pulling the show enables Disney to take an impairment charge as it has spent money on a production that it deems to not be viable. It is essentially a reduction in the value of an asset, and this creates a loss on the company's balance sheet, which reduces its tax bill. Disney has reported that its content purge has generated 1.5 billion in impairment charges, which is precisely the happy ending it was looking for. Disney has been on a cost-cutting drive since its chief executive Bob Iger returned to the helm of the company in November last year. 3 months later, he told investors that the studio needs to, quote, reduce costs on everything that we make because while we're extremely proud of what's on screen, it's gotten to a point where it's extraordinarily expensive, unquote. Yeah, and there have been numerous stories about how much money that they're just wasting with the methods they use. There's this sort of scrapbooking method, and things get shot, then reshot a second time, and sometimes even a third time, and the special effects get done, and then they have to be redone and redone again, et cetera, et cetera. Willow is testimony to that, and it was born in the days of lavish spending in a bid to attract subscribers. That expense might be justifiable in the end result if the end result fuels a surge in fan interest, but not if it flounders like Willow. Even then, the value of spending so much money on chasing subscribers is easy to question, which explains why Iger has said that retaining loyal subscribers rather than pure subscriber growth is becoming the new priority. In other words, we just want to try and not lose them. In a bid to compensate for the colossal costs of production, Iger has cut around 7,000 of Disney's staff, or roughly 3% of its global workforce. But even that isn't enough. He recently told CNBC that Disney is slowing down when it comes to making movies and streaming series for its flagship Marvel and Star Wars franchises. Quote, you pull back not just to focus, but also as part of our cost containment initiative, spending less on what we make and making less, unquote. If further Marvel and Star Wars series aren't even assured, the prospect of a second season of Willow seems to be far, far away. Yeah. Yeah, they ain't going to be another Willow series. That is not happening. Jonathan Kasdan can say whatever he wants. He'll get that second season of Willow around the same time Ryan Johnson gets his Star Wars trilogy. All right. And let's see, what's the next one here? Okay. Yeah, and let's just go ahead and since we're talking about Disney losing money, now this next story comes from Dining Disney, isn't that what it's called? Yeah, Disney Dining. Disney loses billions at the box office. The Walt Disney Company has had a rough time at the box office for a year and a half. Poor numbers with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, Strange World, Lightyear, and others have caused the studio to lose hundreds of millions with each film. The unfortunate trend for Walt Disney Studios seems to be staying on track with Haunted Mansion. In fact, the film may lose the studio another 225 million, bringing Disney's total to a nearly 2 billion loss at the box office over the last 15 months. Beginning with the animated film Lightyear, Walt Disney Studios has yet to turn a profit with any movie they've released over their past 10 films, although some may eventually break even. The list includes Lightyear, Thor Love and Thunder, Strange World, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. That didn't make money? I thought that made money. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now I know that made money. The Little Mermaid, Elemental, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and The Haunted Mansion. The cost of all 10 films, including production, marketing, and distribution, is estimated to be a little over 4 billion. However, the total amount the films have brought in is approximately 2.31 billion, equaling an overall loss of around 1.865 million. So maybe they're just lumping them all together and saying they took a loss on the whole thing, because I'm sure Guardians of the Galaxy made money, and Wakanda Forever did too, probably. All right, Haunted Mansion has been reported to cost nearly 150 million to produce, with an estimated 150 million to market and distribute. However, as of this past weekend, the film sits at ticket sales of 75.5 million. The film starring Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, Lakeith Stanfield, and others continues the trend of Disney films not performing at the box office. Some may point to the movie's low performance as the cast scaling back from promotional events due to the current SAG-AFTRA strike. However, Disney fans and those who love the attraction from Disneyland and Walt Disney World are still not showing up at theaters, at least not in the volume Disney needs. And I think part of the issue is that Haunted Mansion is just so clearly a Halloween movie. You know, it really probably shouldn't have been released in summer. But I believe this spot where it was released, this was originally when Marvels was coming out. Marvels was going to come out in this spot, but they moved that back to November. And I guess they needed to put something here and release it. So Haunted Mansion kind of got thrown under the bus. Unless there's a sudden surge of interest in the next week or two, it seems likely that this 10th box office bomb for Disney will put them in an almost 2 billion loss in theatrical releases. The upcoming MCU movie, The Marvels, expected to be released this fall, is not likely to be a rousing success for the Walt Disney Company. No, no, it will not, I don't think. Put the figure of 2 billion into theme park language. 1 billion is the approximate budget that Universal Studios is using to build their Epic Universe theme park, and the amount that Walt Disney Company spent to create Animal Kingdom. So in theory, Disney could have made two new theme parks comparable in size, scope, and ambition to current Universal and Disney parks. Two new theme parks or 10 box office flops. I know which one of those two options I'd rather have. However, it seems unlikely that the company or Disney CEO Bob Iger will do anything as drastic as invest more money in theme parks, despite it being the company's main source of revenue. But whatever the Walt Disney Company decides to do, it needs to figure out a plan fast. A film studio can weather a box office failure every so often, but when it's losing company money at a rate of almost 2 billion over 15 months, something needs to change. The box office losses are also in addition to the disappointing metrics with Disney Plus subscribers, a decrease in the stock price, and lower park attendance. Hopefully, the Walt Disney Company and or Bob Iger can figure out a solution that turns Disney back around. Well, they actually did announce a profit in that earnings call, but they got to profit because of all the cost cutting, because of all the people they fired, shutting down the Star Cruiser, writing off the Star Cruiser and Willow and all those other things in order to get money from the depreciation. Okay, now here's one I was not aware of. And I mentioned, they've got other legal matters that are hitting them besides that Florida mess. So this is one I didn't even know about until I kind of stumbled across it a couple of days ago. Okay, this is from InsideTheMagic.net. So, Disneyland Paris strike update. Cast members threaten explosion as tensions rise. All right, Disney cast members continue to protest for higher wages and better working conditions, contributing to show cancellations and rising crowds at the French Disney park. A clash between striking employees and Disney security resulted in multiple injuries last week. Still, leadership at Disney Park and Walt Disney Studios Park refused to negotiate with striking employees. Disneyland Paris Resort President Natasha Rafalski told striking employees to expect to wait until August for a raise if one is coming at all. The executive alleged that the former Euro Disney might not be profitable enough to support increased cast member wages. The National Union of Autonomous Trade Unions responded to Rafalski on Friday, according to Forbes. They called a brief meeting with the president a quote train wreck and condemned her quote lack of sincerity and consideration. For the UNSA Disneyland Paris, there is no question of moving on to something else. UNSA wrote in a statement, "We will continue to fight for better working conditions, a considerable quality of life, and a significant increase for all DLP cast members." They added that the president's response, quote, represents a serious problem and inevitably leads to a situation that could become explosive. Disneyland Paris became profitable in 2017 when the Walt Disney Company purchased its remaining shares and regained control of the property. Years of third party operation had kept the Disney park in the red and destroyed its reputation for decades. Walt Disney Resort and Disneyland Resort could be models for success for their French counterparts. In the last year, cast member unions spent months negotiating with the Walt Disney Company, with some employees striking for higher hourly wages and benefits. Both Disney parks and their respective employee unions eventually agreed on new contracts. So, yeah, I didn't even know that was going on, that they had people striking against the company over in France. And that'll probably it's going to be interesting because I mean that lady Rafalski, she basically said we're not giving you a raise. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if indeed they do refuse to give the wage increases that the workers over there want, because the French are very prone to strikes and they don't like hearing the word no, I think. Okay, what do I hit next here? Where is Now I had another story about a lawsuit. Where is that? All right, give me a second here. TSG. I seem to have lost my spot on that. Let me get that up here. Is Huh. I could have sworn I had that thing. All right, let me Let's see if I can find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is from Bounding into Comics. Bring this up. All right. So, film financier TSG Entertainment sues Disney and Fox for breach of contract. They claim they have, quote, tried to use nearly every trick in the Hollywood accounting playbook to deprive us out of hundreds of. Uh, get lost. All right. And yet another blow to the House of Mouse's already shaky financial standings. Hollywood financier company TSG Entertainment has officially accused the 20th Century Fox and Walt Disney Company of having used a myriad of dirty accounting tricks to deprive them out of hundreds of millions. Conceived in 2013 as an answer to 20th Century Fox's then lack of a long-term film financing partner, and later expanding its operations in 2015 thanks to a multi-million dollar investment into the company from Chinese film studio Bona Film Group. TSG Entertainment has been the wallet behind a number of the studio's recent productions. From every X-Men film produced since 2013, including The Wolverine, X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men Apocalypse, Deadpool, and Alita Battle Angel, to non-nerd hits such as The Martian and Ford versus Ferrari. If a film was coming from Fox, regardless of the genre, TSG more than likely had a hand in it. Following Disney's 2017 acquisition of 20th Century Fox, now 20th Century Studios, TGS's contract was likewise placed under Mickey's management, where they would continue to finance projects developed by the newly crowned subsidiary. During this period, TGS would help Disney produced such films as Free Guy, Dark Phoenix, The New Mutants, and Avatar: The Way of Water. However, though some of the films they backed would go on to make significant amounts of money, particularly the Avatar sequel, GSG has claimed that due to underhanded dealing from Fox and Disney, what? Get out of here. Say it ain't so. They never received their fair share of these profits. I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. This case is a chilling example of how two Hollywood behemoths with a long and shameful history of Hollywood accounting, defendants Fox and Disney, have tried to use nearly every trick in the Hollywood accounting playbook to deprive plaintiff TSG, the financier who in good faith invested more than 3.3 billion with them, out of hundreds of millions of dollars, declared the financier in the introduction to their suit as obtained by Deadline. According to TSG, suspicions regarding their agreement with Fox first arose when the company noticed that their, quote, return on its investments in Fox films decreased dramatically. Let me guess, when they were bought by Disney. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that started when they were bought by Disney. TSG then proceeded to launch an independent audit of Fox's books, wherein they discovered that, quote, Fox had employed a number of underhanded Hollywood accounting tricks in order to underpay TSG by at least 40 million. Further, the auditors also reported uncovered rampant self-dealing, the practice by which a studio enters into sweetheart deals with its license affiliates to artificially minimize the profit payments to stakeholders like TSG, who generally share only in the revenues received by the studio, excluding the revenues received directly by these licensing exhibitors. One particular instance of self dealing that was allegedly brought to light related to, quote, an output agreement with FX, which promised that FX would have the right to exhibit reruns of subsequently released Fox films in exchange for pre established license fees based on the domestic box office performance of each film. TSG learned that Fox had ignored the terms of its own output agreement and licensed at least one film, The Shape of Water, which won Best Picture at the 90th Academy Awards, to FX in a backroom side deal that appallingly shaved nearly 4 million off of the party's previously agreed upon price, explained the financier. Thus, Fox simply ignored its own existing agreement and renegotiated a sweetheart deal for an Oscar-winning qualifying picture to enrich its own affiliate, FX. Unfortunately for TSG, it appears that Fox's self dealing did not stop once they were bought out by Disney. Okay, so it did start before Disney. All right, fair enough. Rather, TSG believes that the two entities conspired to undercut their profits from home video sales by making certain films available on Disney Plus and HBO Max the same day they were released on home video. The result was that consumers with access to these streaming platforms would have no incentive to buy the qualifying pictures on Blu ray or via digital stores, said the financier's legal team. On information and belief, the ability to offer films for streaming so soon after release was tremendously valuable to Disney Plus and Hulu, and by extension to their owner Disney, and massively boosted the subscribership of these streaming platforms while reducing canceled subscriptions known as churn. The company continued. However, Fox allowed its sister company Disney to take up all of this upside without sharing any of it with Fox, and therefore TSG received none of the upside either. To this end, TSG, yeah, TSG, okay, they got TGS here. To this end, TSG believes that these contract breaches were a direct result of the interference of Disney, which induced Fox to disregard its obligations to TSG in order to promote Disney's wholly owned or majority owned streaming platforms. For fiscal year 2021, that proportion increased further as Mr. Chapek received equity grants of 5.6 times his salary for, in the words of the 2022 annual report, quote, successfully increasing subscribers to Disney Plus and Hulu. Recall TGS. When Mr. Iger was reinstated as CEO in November 2022, he received a compensation package including potential performance-based stock grants valued at 15 million with a base salary of 1 million. Okay, so I think, well, let me read the rest of it first. So in short, they then declared Disney and the executives running it had and continue to have every incentive to do anything and everything they can, including manipulating distribution of the qualifying pictures and preventing TSG from liquidating its interest in certain tranches of qualifying pictures to attempt to boost Disney's share price. Yeah, so I think what they're saying here is Iger and other execs at Disney, they're getting bonuses based on what the stock price is and also by how much subscriber growth there is on Disney Plus. More subscribers, hey, more money for Iger and other people at the top. So they've got an incentive to take these pictures and the out of the theaters and get them onto streaming as quick as they can in order to help boost the numbers. And when they do that, that's preventing TSG from getting as much money as they think they should be getting. Additionally, TSG also believes that Fox has improperly charged TSG millions of dollars in purported distribution expenses associated with the operation of a service called Movies Anywhere, as Fox reports no receipts to TSG in connection with this Movies Anywhere service. Yet Fox has allocated to each qualifying picture a portion of its costs associated with operating this entity. Yet, perhaps TSG's most damning complaint regards their belief that following the Fox acquisition, the number of films, quote, were effectively abandoned. A number of films were effectively abandoned in bad faith by Disney, thus leading to a significant decline in audience awareness and marketing position for Fox's films. I certainly felt at the time that New Mutants kind of felt that way, that there really wasn't a whole lot of marketing for that film, and it did kind of feel like that movie was just sort of discarded. The mismanagement of the qualifying pictures that followed Disney's overhaul of Fox's film division has been significant and demonstrable, they said, even after adjusting for the downturn at theaters during the COVID-19 pandemic. All this considered, TSG is seeking monetary damages and punitive damages and amounts to be proven at trial, as well as payment of all, quote, prejudgment interest and attorney's fees and costs related to the case. In other words, a lot of money, a lot of money at a time when Disney really can't afford to be losing like millions, tens, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in a lawsuit. That's a pity, isn't it? Really a shame. Couldn't happen to a nicer company. Okay, and of course, all of these financial losses are leading some to speculate that Disney might be bought out. So I've got a story about that. Let me bring this up. Okay, and this is from dailymail.com. Apple is interested in buying Disney, according to insiders, in a deal that could be worth 160 billion. Get ready for iMarvel, iStar Wars, and iPixar. Disney CEO Bob Iger has reignited speculation that he intends to sell the iconic entertainment company to tech giant Apple following last week's earnings call. Pardon me a moment. I need to drink a glass of water. Give me just a second here. Okay. As Iger told shareholders, the company is debating a variety of strategic options for how to deal with its current ownership of old school television network ABC and cable networks like FX and National Geographic. Iger went even further on CNBC, suggesting that in the age of cord cutting, these legacy TV channels, quote, may not be core to Disney. That would leave a streamlined Disney holding just the cherished characters and intellectual property that Apple would want for its platforms. Marvel superheroes, Disney princesses, Pixar creations, and the entire Star Wars galaxy. Disney insiders and veteran Hollywood execs think Iger's statements indicate he may be streamlining the House of Mouse with plans to make exactly such an offer more palatable both to Apple and federal regulators. As one senior industry hand put it, I don't think Apple would buy the company as it presently exists. But if you see Bob start to divest things, that feels like he's prepping for a sale. But both paths will come with treacherous obstacles for Disney, at least according to the legal experts and financial analysts who spoke with the Hollywood Reporter. If Disney stays independent, it's left to compete in a streaming market against staggering tech behemoths, each with profitable core businesses outside of their whole media game, meaning that they never need to really make money from producing content. But if Disney tries to sell, it will face a level of government scrutiny that one legal scholar described as basically walking into a bear trap. It's a given. It's an absolute certainty, St. John's University law professor Anthony Sabino said. If there was some talk of Disney merging with somebody else, that would be scrutinized to the nth degree by the FTC, by the Department of Justice. I'm not sure any company would be willing to get immersed with that, said Sabino, who views Iger's recent CEO contract extension as one big sign that there's no thought of him selling off the company. Nevertheless, rumors that Apple may one day purchase Disney have circled both companies for years. The speculation comes in part due to their historic ties. After the sale of CGI powerhouse Pixar to Disney in 2006, Apple co founder Steve Jobs joined Disney's board of directors as their largest individual shareholder, owning a 7% stake. Yeah, that's true. Remember, Pixar started out, I think, as part of, or as a kind of a spinoff of Apple. After Jobs' untimely death in 2011, Iger himself joins Apple's board, resigning in 2019 only to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest when Apple entered the streaming wars itself with the announcement of Apple TV Plus. But the changing economics of the streaming era are another key factor fueling the acquisition rumors. With all major Hollywood studios looking like minnows compared to the big fish in big tech, which they're now forced to compete against. Disney's total value on the stock market as of this month is estimated at 158 billion. A giant number, but one dwarfed by Apple's 2.8 trillion valuation, Amazon's 1.45 trillion value, and even Netflix's 193 billion market cap. The personalities involved are yet another reason some believe a sale is inevitable, in particular Iger's desire, some claim, to cement his legacy. As one Disney insider who has worked with Iger predicted last year, he's going to sell the company. This is the pinnacle deal for the ultimate deal maker, the insider explained. In 2019, Iger himself floated the idea that such a deal would have actually already happened by now had Steve Jobs not tragically passed away from cancer in 2011. Quote, I believe that if Steve were still alive, we would have combined our companies, Iger wrote in his autobiography, or at least discussed the possibility very seriously. I think he'd welcome it. He'd be the last CEO of Disney, one former top Disney exec told The Wrap, noting that the two companies' reputation for feel good, family friendly content gives them similar brand identities that would blend well. The added investment and financial strength would be a boon for Disney, defending its reputation as it has been plunged into the front line of America's culture wars and dubbed woke Disney by its conservative critics. On Wall Street, analysts seem to believe that the deal is inevitable. Needham and Company analyst Laura Martin predicted that Disney will be purchased during the next 3 years, likely by Apple in no small measure because big tech can swallow any of these Hollywood studios whole. If they don't sell, Disney will be competing against those companies, Martin wrote last month, in an industry with deteriorating economics because they, Amazon or Apple, never need to actually make money on their content. But a purchase of Disney by Apple would not come without regulatory hurdles. Although there's very little overlap between a technology hardware maker like Apple and an entertainment media and theme park company like Disney, policy experts believe that the pair's sheer size and power together would raise red flags. I agree. Echoing a recently thwarted merger in the world of book publishing, regulators may take issue with not just the new company's monopoly power, but with its monopsony power as well. While a while a monopoly can set non-competitive prices that hurt consumers, a monopsony can use its clout as a purchaser or distributor to set prices for vendors, creators, and others. Amazon's marketplace, as well as Apple and Android's app stores, are just some of the giant platforms that have raised monopsony concerns in recent years. Last year, the U.S. Department of Justice scored a significant legal victory preventing Paramount from selling off its book publisher Simon and Schuster to Penguin Random House. The judge sided with the DOJ in his argument that the consolidated book company would become a monopsony that would inevitably hurt authors hoping to negotiate a fair price for the sale of their work. One path forward for Disney and Apple could be the model of Microsoft's successful acquisition of video game maker Activision Blizzard. Microsoft got out ahead of the FTC's efforts to block the deal, promising preemptively that it would continue to license key video games for sale on the consoles of Microsoft's Xbox competitors, Sony and Nintendo. Perhaps the most volatile and least predictable variable in the deal is just how Disney fanatics, a sizable but not dominant portion of Disney shareholders, might react to the prospect of a merger. The uproar from Disney shareholders would be insane, according to Sabino. Loyal Disney fans, he said, could potentially flip out over the prospect of a tech company letting Disney's entertainment properties dwindle or allowing their beloved theme park businesses to go to seed. But with more than 60% of Disney's outstanding shares held by institutional investors, mutual funds, pensions, and other large financial actors focused on their own bottom line, fans might not have the power to make waves. No matter the legal technicalities or the audience reactions, many major studio executives are expecting that big tech will continue to pressure Hollywood into either consolidating or thinning their ranks. There will end up being 3 or 4 platforms, and everybody else will get hollowed out and acquired, one industry veteran told The Hollywood Reporter. There will be Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and one other. If you could put NBC Universal, Warner Brothers, and Paramount together, you probably have enough to survive, this veteran speculated. And with a higher market capitalization than both Amazon and Netflix combined, Apple would clearly be the most comfortable, desirable, stable new home for Disney. As another Hollywood exec put it, there's clearly no buyer like Apple. Yeah, so I mean, obviously they have the money to do it. And as they note repeatedly in the article, these companies like Apple and Amazon, these tech giants, they don't really need to even make money on the shows. They make so much money from, their software and online sales and stuff like that, that they don't really even need to make money on the streaming service, which is probably good because they don't make money anyway. And actually, I heard another story related to Apple maybe acquiring something. So there's a YouTube channel called Sidetrack is what it's called, and the guy on there he does some pretty good stuff. He generally does videos on various sci-fi properties, and I guess he gets, he does scoops. He's one of those guys that does scoops. He gets information from people at the studios, what have you. And I actually was it today? I think it was earlier today. I saw, or maybe it was yesterday. I saw a video of him talking about the Expanse and what might be happening with the Expanse here in the near future. So, the Expanse, if you know, of course, based on a series of books and was turned into a TV series. Now, originally, the first 3 seasons aired on Sci-Fi Channel, or Sci-Fi is what they call it. And then it was canceled there, but then it was picked up by Amazon, which then aired seasons 4, 5, and 6. The final season ended, was it like 2.5 years ago now? I think it was about 2.5 years ago. And according to Sidetrack, so they had a contract with Amazon, of course, for the right to distribute the show. Well, that contract is running out early next year, like January, February. I think that contract is going to expire. And there are some other some Hollywood entities that have expressed interest in acquiring the Expanse in order to produce and distribute new content for the show. Now, the way the book series works is, the first 6 books more or less tell pretty much a consistent story. There isn't a whole lot of gap between them, but it's a 9 novel series. Now, between the 6th novel and then the 7th novel, the final 3 books, there's like a 30-year time jump, right? And of course, the show stopped after the 6th season. Now, at the time that the show ended, the producers of the show, they made it clear that they were interested in continuing the show. Maybe not as a series though, maybe doing some movies to kind of round out the story. Now, since the show ended, according to Sidetrack, what I think there was Warner Brothers and Netflix and Apple had all basically expressed interest in acquiring the Expanse and doing new content on the Expanse. And I assume generally meaning continuing the series, right? So apparently now HBO has, or Warner Brothers and HBO have kind of backed off. And I'm guessing that may be in part because of this Babylon 5 reboot that HBO and Warner Brothers are kind of cooking up, which originally I believe was going to be on CW, but now that CW's been bought by Comcast and is going to be focusing on reality shows and other low cost entertainment like that, I'm guessing it's not going to go there. So probably it's going to go to streaming. And if they have a sci-fi show like Babylon 5 on streaming, then do they really need to get the Expanse, right? And Netflix similarly apparently has kind of backed off, but apparently, as Sidetrack put it, described it, Apple is very keen to acquire the Expanse and do more Expanse stuff. However, there are some issues. The main thing, of course, is that yes, they can continue the show, but the problem is, the first 3 seasons, I think the first 3 seasons are on Netflix now. So the first 3 seasons are on Netflix. The second, the 4, 5, and 6 seasons are on Amazon, another platform. And then if you want to watch more of the new stuff, then it's going to be on Apple TV. So if someone wants to see the whole show, they're pretty much going to have to buy 3 subscriptions to streaming services, right? And they see that as a big obstacle to growing the audience and bringing in new viewers. And so apparently There have been talks with Apple and the people run the Expanse about doing not essentially just continuing the story as it is in the books, but doing maybe some sort of series that would kind of bridge the gap between where the original story kind of stops and then where it resumes in that 30-year time jump, basically to do some kind of series that takes place in that 30-year period. And I'm assuming that's to kind of get people familiar with the Expanse and kind of get them familiar with the setting before then you continue on with the final 3 books. But apparently another possibility they've discussed is possibly actually doing, and this isn't certain, I don't think, at least not yet, but doing a full reboot of The Expanse, just rebooting the show completely and doing a whole new Expanse series. Again, whether that would happen or not, I don't know. And whether Apple will wind up getting it, I don't know. But that seems to be where things kind of stand with The Expanse. Okay. So let's talk about Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle, not doing too well. And this is from what? Okay, here we go. So weekend box office. Beetle stumbles with 25 million debut. Ends Barbie's 4-week streak. Blue Beetle debuted this weekend with a poor showing of 25.4 million from 3,871 theaters. The film took in another 18 million internationally. Wow, only 18 million internationally to debut for 43 million worldwide. The $104 million film is the second lowest debut for a DCEU film after Wonder Woman 1984's COVID era release. Word of mouth isn't even that high, as the film scored a B plus cinema score with a 3.3 on Letterboxd. This will be DC's 4th flop in a row, and we still have Aquaman to come. Tragic, yeah. Um, I wonder. They say it in that 18 million overseas. I'm wondering, or internationally. I'm wondering if that includes like South American and Central American countries, because the character's a Latino superhero, so it would have more appeal there. I mean, if it comes out in those countries and it flops, that's bad. I mean, that's really bad. But I don't know which countries it's actually been released in yet. Like I say, my review of Blue Beetle is on my channel, so I hope you folks will check it out. But this doesn't really surprise me. You kind of had the feeling. I mean, I think pretty much everything DC puts out is going to be DOA until that new Superman movie comes out, and supposedly in 2025. But with the strikes going on, I don't know how that's going to affect things. That may push it back further. I don't know. But yeah, this flopped. So well, let me think here. So this flopped, Flash flopped, Shazam flopped, Black Adam, which was coming up on a year ago. When did that come out? That came out last October, I think, didn't it? Or maybe it was September. And so we're coming up on a year for that. What came before that? And I think before that was what James Gunn Suicide Squad movie. That was a flop. I mean, really, in the last 2 or 3 years, the only thing DC's done that's been successful, well, maybe not 3 years, but say 2 years, has been that Peacemaker show, which I guess did okay. I don't know. But yeah, it's gonna be Aquaman's gonna be a flop too, I'm afraid. And I hate that because I really like Aquaman. I'm a big Aquaman fan, but it just looks like nothing DC does is gonna be a success until they reboot, because I think partially because they've alienated a certain portion of the audience, mainly the Snyderverse fans, because of the whole reboot. And then other people are just like not interested in waiting to see what happens with the reboot and not bothering to see any of the current stuff. Now, speaking of James Gunn, let's talk a bit about where am I at? Oh, I'm almost at an hour already. Okay. So I'll do a couple more stories here maybe, and then we'll wrap up. I'm only going to go an hour. Okay, so this is bounding into comics again. After claiming the reason he fired Henry Cavill was because of his age, James Gunn now says, "I was never making a young Superman movie." DC CEO James Gunn, who also happens to be the writer and director for the upcoming Superman Legacy film, recently stated he was, quote, never making a young Superman, despite previously asserting the reason he canned Henry Cavill was due to his age. Back in December 2022, Gunn seemed to make it crystal clear that his main reason for firing Henry Cavill from the role of Superman was because of his age. He posted on Twitter, quote, in the initial stages, our story will be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill. A day after noting his movie was focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, Gunn asserted that Henry was fired because, quote, he's a different age. In response to another user questioning Gunn's narrative that the film was not an origin story, Gunn asserted he's not meeting the major characters for the first time either. He's merely younger. However, by the end of January, Gunn had begun attempting to shift the narrative he initially created around why Henry Cavill was fired. First, he told The Hollywood Reporter that Cavill wasn't fired, despite Cavill cameoing in Black Adam as Superman, and then announcing his return to the character on Instagram. A little over a month after that announcement, Cavill would inform his followers that he would not be returning to the role. Gunn said, quote, we didn't fire Henry. Henry was never cast. For me, it's about who do I want to cast as Superman and who do the filmmakers we have want to cast. And for me, for this story, it isn't Henry. As for why he said, quote, I like Henry. I think he's a great guy. I think he's getting dicked around by a lot of people, including the former regime at this company. Oh, shots fired. But this Superman is not Henry for a number of reasons. Of note, Gunn's reasoning here did not include Henry's age at all, despite making multiple tweets about it just a month earlier. Gunn was attempting to shift the narrative. Gunn continued the narrative shift in March when he responded to a casting rumor that claimed Gunn was looking for actors to play Superman, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen in their 20s. He said, quote, untrue. We haven't begun casting other than making lists, and it's not limited to people in their 20s. Gunn would eventually cast David Cornsweet to play Superman. At the time of the casting announcement, he was 29. However, he has since turned 30. Henry Cavill just turned 40 at the time of the casting announcement. Given Cornsweet's casting and Gunn's clear shift in narrative, it was already looking like something else was a motivating factor as to why Henry Cavill was fired from Superman, aside from his age. Given Hollywood routinely has older actors play younger and younger actors play older, it is acting after all. Gunn would complete the shift in the narrative in a recent response to a fan asking about Jaime Reyes knowing who Superman is in the Blue Beetle film. Gunn said, quote, I was never making a young Superman movie, just a Superman movie. This is Gunn obviously playing semantic games because he most definitely said his Superman was younger and that it would be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life. It's not hard to put two and two together and realize he was indeed talking about a young Superman, especially when he claimed the biggest issue was Cavill's age back in December. Given this complete change in the narrative, it also raises the further questions to why he actually fired Henry Cavill. So I think in this one, I mean, it's first of all, how are we defining young or defining younger? I think that's the thing. Because I mean, even in the article, it says that Cornsweet is about a decade younger than Cavill. So I do think maybe that's age is part of the reason. I also think a big part of the reason is the cost. I remember when they announced that Wonder Woman 3 wasn't going to happen originally, it was noted that Gal Gadot would probably make somewhere in the 20 to $30 million range for the movie. And I'm sure that Cavill would get at least that much for another Superman movie. So I think a big part of it is just reducing costs. But it does seem like for whatever reason, Henry Cavill is not well liked in Hollywood. And, I think part of it is because of the whole issue of that Cavill is something of a fan of some of these things. We've heard about the issues he had on The Witcher show, where he would kind of point out when they were getting things wrong in the lore and stuff like that. And apparently the showrunners did not like him because of that. Because of course they wanted to just make the show their own thing rather than actually going with the source material, which is what so many of these people are doing in Hollywood now. So I think that's part of the reason why people in Hollywood don't like him. I think because he speaks up too much and he voices his opinion about the properties. And again, he's something of a fan, and that's not what they want. We've heard stories about how, like for instance, over at Marvel Studios, they make a deliberate attempt to get people who are not fans of Marvel to write them and direct them and stuff like that because they don't want fans. And I think that plays into it as well. Okay, so I'm at an hour here. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I want to again thank folks who tuned in during the live stream and those who will watch on a rewatch. And I hope you all have a good evening. And I'll probably be back next week to do another live cast. And I will see you all then. Have a good night, folks.